Good afternoon, dear students. Welcome to another session of DSP algorithms and architecture. So, in the previous session, we started off with the discussion of architectures, which is related to digital signal processing devices, in which we discussed what are the basic architectural features. So, as we see in microcontroller, here also we have a similar kind of architectural features. That is, it will be having arithmetic unit. It can be having logic unit, which we, in short, we call as ALU. Then, in order to speed up the process, which is the difference between your regular microprocessor and the DSP processor. DSP needs to be fast enough as compared to your microprocessor. So, in order to cater to this, few other basic features have to be added. For example, one such structure is multiply and accumulate operation, which is being performed. Then, apart from that, we saw that yesterday Braun multiplier also can be utilized, which is a kind of parallel multiplier. Then, apart from that, there might be requirement for scaling of the signals. Then we'll see that further there is requirement for we can have structures such as the barrel shifter and other steps, which takes care of shifting operations at a very faster rate. For example, within one cycle, I want to obtain the shifting. So that can be done with the help of the barrel shifter. Whereas those kind of shifters are not present in your regular microprocessors. The shifting operation is done in your regular form. Suppose if you want to shift n bits, it will take n cycles to shift that number. But in DSP, if you have a barrel shifter, n number of bits can be shifted within one machine cycle, but the delay depends on the longest path which is present. So that will be seeing in coming forth slides. So then apart from that, so this is arithmetic logic, multiply and accumulate, signal scaling. So these are the computational blocks which are required. Then apart from that, we have the on-chip registers, memories, which are required. That is the registers, RAM and ROM. So we saw an example that based on this nth order FIR filter, what are the DSP architect? What are the features which the DSP architecture would be used to implement this one? So we require memory to store the filter coefficient. We require memory to store the signal coefficient, signal values. We require memory or register to store the result. Then we require MAC unit to perform this multiply and accumulate operation. Then intermediate results, if I want to store, even for that, I require the register. Then apart from that, how many operations, MAC operations have been performed and how many are pending. So I require a counter or register to store that information. So these are just a few things. Based on the equation, we can identify that these are the features which would be required to have the FIR implementation using the DSP architecture. So these are just a few things. Then apart from that, we require say identification of which sample is being utilized, whether it is a coefficient sample or the signal sample. So 2 pointers related to that. So that is registers indirectly. We require to store the information which sample has been accessed. So these are the few things what we discussed yesterday. Then these were few things which we started off, in which we started with the multiplier. So if you are building a DSP hardware, it all depends on what functionality is required, what is the speed requirement, and what is the accuracy or the precision requirement. Then a few of the basic building blocks of DSP computations are these things. That is multiplier, shifter, MAC unit, and ALU. So we'll be looking into one after the other. So yesterday we started off with the multiplication, that is a multiplier. So when we have two numbers, this is your equational representation how the multiplication actually appears. So whether it is binary or your decimal, the multiplication operation remains the same. So this is binary representation what they have taken. So based on this equation only, we saw the Braun multiplier. We saw this Braun multiplier. So here one thing I just wanted to mention. Yesterday I missed out that part. Now here we can see that say the first one A naught B naught. So if I come back to this equation, right, here you can see that no matter what numbers are there, and how many bits are there, this operation remains the same. That is, you multiply this number with this, that will be leading to the first digit, then the next one, then this with this, the third one, so on, it will continue. Now here, what I wanted to specify is whether you represent the numbers in the signed form or unsigned form. Only a change is this is unsigned representation. This is the overall equation what we have. But when we come to signed representation, one bit is utilized for sign purpose. So when we multiply the overall, for example, if I'm multiplying -1 with -2, the result will be plus. It will be +2. So even minus sign also gets, minus sign also has to be considered when we are performing this operation. So that care we should take. So whenever we are doing this, we can just see over here, and in binary, right? If I have a number like this, and if I say that this is a signed number, we specify that based on this bit, I'll be telling that this is plus or minus. If it is 1, it is minus. If it is 0, it is positive number. So this is how I represent it. Now, what I wanted to stress is, so whether you're doing it in signed or unsigned operation, you convert this into 2's complement and then you go ahead. So sign bit is taken care. Now, the multiplication operation remains the same. So this is the implementation. This implementation remains the same. So here, the same thing is represented for the Braun multiplier. So A naught, B naught, there is no elements to be added over here. So directly I'll be getting the first one. So that's why I don't have an adder over here. So first P naught I'll be getting. Next one, next bit, if you just see, it is B naught multiplied with A1, which I'll be getting in this form. Then I'll be continuing, I'll be getting all this. So I'll be shifting one location this side. So I'll be shifting. So I'll be taking the next bit and multiplying it with each of the bits. So B1 into A naught. So the first one, then A1 into B1, and so on, similarly up to all the numbers. Now here you can see that if I want P1, what happens is I should add these two numbers. So when I'm adding these two numbers, one possibility what happens is, suppose if it is a binary number, I want to add 1 plus 1. So what is the result? The result is 1, 0. So this is the sum result and this is the carry. So in that case, what would happen if this is 1 and this is 1? P1 would be 0 and one additional carry would be generated, which will be considered here for addition. So that is what this representation is. That is what this representation is. Okay. So this one I had missed out yesterday. So therefore, we can see that for the first case, there is no carry at all. For the first few numbers, you can see from this one, A naught, for these all, there is no carry. There is no carry. But for once I start from this point, right, I require the carry. Okay. So that is what is represented. So here there is no adder, no nothing. So this one is not propagating, but when I start with the next one, these two numbers are added. The carry for this one is 0 because nothing is there in the previous this thing. So once I get this, I'll be getting P1. For example, if the result is 1 and 1, and this is 0, so 1 plus 1, P naught will be 0, but one additional carry will be coming in. So that carry will be sent via this path. So this is the carry which will be propagating to the next stage. That is the carry whatever is generated from this one, from its previous state. Okay. So this one I had missed out. Therefore, you can see that it is the adder is having 3 inputs and 2 outputs. One is giving you the sum and the other one is giving you the carry. Okay. This one is giving you the sum and this one is giving you the carry. And P1 is the overall product for the number A and B. So whether it is signed or unsigned, the operation remains the same. In signed, based on the MS bit, you try to decide what is the overall result representation, whether it is plus or minus. So moving ahead, there are few concepts which are related to these things. Now, first one is the speed. Now, when we speak of microprocessor, right, when we are doing multiplication, we use shift and add method. So if you remember, we have different methods like shift and save, add and save, shift and add. So these kind of methods which are available. So in generally in microprocessor, they follow shift and add process for multiplication. Now, what would this do is, if I'm multiplying two numbers of n bits each, then this would require a total of n machine cycles or the processor cycles. Now, but in DSP, what is the main feature? It should be fast enough. And if I'm taking n cycles for multiplication itself, and you can see that in convolution, for example, how many multiplications will be present? There will be many multiplications which will be present because it is dependent on the input signal and the filter coefficient. If the coefficients are 100 coefficients are present, then imagine what would be the time taken just to implement the convolution. If 100, because if 100 coefficients are there, then at least 100 multiplications for just to get one sample of the output. And if there are 100 samples, so it will be 100 into 100, just a rough estimate. It will be 100 into 100. So imagine what might be the time required. So this is not feasible to be utilized in DSP systems. So for that purpose, what we do is we go ahead with parallel processing. We go ahead with parallel processing. So that is what we try to achieve with this multiplier. This is one form of multiplier. We have again Bog-Woolley multiplier, which is much efficient than this. So there are different multipliers. This is just an example. So here, what happens is the overall delay in this case. So in this one, in microprocessor, what is happening is it is taking n processor cycles. The same operation in DSP could be completed within one cycle. But the delay depends on the maximum path delay which is present in this entire structure. For example, here I am having three adders, here I am having three adders. The maximum delay would be, say, for example, it would be for this path. I'm just taking an example over here. So that is overall result, that is P0 to P7, all the bits will be available after this amount of delay. So that is what we have to check out. So this is how implementation can be done in order to reduce the time of processing. So that is one this thing. Then for an adder technique, we go in for parallel adder. So when I'm going for parallel adder, the longest time which will be taken will be equivalent to the longest path delay which is present. So as I showed in the previous, just this is a multiplier. Don't assume that. So let us assume that this is the adder. This is just the adder. So I am adding n number of bits together. So the overall delay of this one is dependent dependent on the longest path which is present in this circuit. When we want to go for fast processing. In microprocessor, generally you don't go in for parallel adder, but we try to achieve it in this form, okay, in DSP. And now, how do I again achieve the improvements in the speed of the DSP? So we can go for advanced technologies of the memories which are present. So previously it was, say, large scale integration. After that came in VLS, a very large scale integration. Then now it might be the ultra large scale integration. So if I am using the modern technologies, what would happen is I would be able to process the information, fetch the information, store the information in the memory at a very faster rate. So that is what advancement in memory can be termed. Then apart from that, I try to lower the access time. How do I lower the access time? One is by use of the technological aspects. Then apart from that, whether, for example, in your system itself, you have a memory and you have a cache. So whenever you open any program, its instruction comes and sits over in the cache. So next time when you open that web page or anything, it opens immediately. So if it is available in the cache, it opens immediately. So something of this kind. So you are lowering the access time to that. Say for example, the web page what we are speaking. But in this is in terms of the hardware is what we are talking about. Then we can use the parallel processing, which will help us improve the speed of the DSP implementation. So these are just a few things to name around which are related to speed relevant factors of DSP. Now, another aspect which we have to check out is what should be the bus widths. Now we are doing addition, we are doing multiplication. So when we are doing addition or multiplication, what happens is if I add two n-bit numbers, what will be the overall size of the result? If I'm adding it, what happens? If I'm multiplying it, what happens? For example, if I'm adding two n-bit numbers, that is n-bit numbers, then what happens is the maximum, for example, would be n plus 1. If I'm adding this thing, one extra bit might be required when you're doing addition. So if you're doing, say, if you're using 3, right? Say if you're multiplying 3 n-bit numbers. So here in this case, I would require one extra, that is 2 bits extra for the addition. Then if I go for 4 bits, so 4 n bits, then I would require say 2 additional bits even in this case. So if I keep on continuing, what I have is I would require n plus log n, where n is the number of elements you want to add. So here in this case, so you can see that the in addition also that that thing is possible. That is the overall result is greater than n bits. Overall result is greater than n bits. Now similarly in multiplication also we have similar kind of problem. Now here what we have is if we have two numbers, say they are n bits each, and I want to multiply these two numbers. I want to multiply these two numbers. Let us say that Z is the result of multiplication of these two numbers. Now, what will be the maximum size of Z? The maximum size of Z can be 2n bits, assuming that this is n and this is n bits. So it can be 2n bits. Now, if now these 2n bits have to be stored in the memory, So that is what is represented here. So x is n bits, y is n bits. When we give it to the multiplier can provide us a maximum of 2n bits. Now this 2n bits also have to go and sit into the memory. Now, what is the problem with this is whenever you talk of, say, for example, the data bus, what we are taking here. So data bus, generally you don't have different widths of data bus. It is usually a common data bus with common bus width. For example, if I have a bus width of n bits, now the same bus will be utilized to fetch the information and to store the information. Same bus will be used to fetch the information and store the information. So here you can see that I require a n bit data bus to fetch x and n bit data bus to fetch y. But to store the result, if I just observe, I would require a bus of width 2n bits. I can give the bus width with 2n bits, but what is the problem with this case? You are increasing the cost. You are increasing the cost of overall implementation. So when we are looking into all these things, all these parameters have to be looked out. So I can provide n bit bus, and to store the result, I can provide 2n bit bus width for storing the information. But this is not feasible. You can do it. But generally you try to avoid because it will increase the cost. So what is the alternative for this? Can I use the similar n bit bus width or n bit bus to store this result? To store this result, can I use this n bit bus which is available. So I can do it, but you have to cater to some logical aspects over there. I might be having two buses which are available. Okay, actually we have two buses itself. One is the program bus and one is the data bus. So this one is n bits and this one is n bits. So generally this is how it will be present in your processors. So we have these two buses. Now program bus, what it does is it fetches the instruction and tries to see what is the next thing which I have to do. So based on the instruction, if data has to be fetched, then data bus will be activated and will be fetching the data. Now here, one thing what we can observe is we can have two separate buses for X and Y. So what would this do is it would say these are the data buses for X and Y, and this is one extra program bus which is present. Now after fetching the instruction, this is actually free now. This is actually free. So what you're doing is you are putting in one extra bus over here. So even this is also possible. You can have one program bus and two data buses to fetch the data and give it to the multiplier. Now, even if you want to reduce even this one, that is, you can see that you have the three buses, program bus and two data bus. Now I can avoid even this also. How do I avoid these things? Once program bus is utilized for fetching the instruction and it gets to know that, okay, next are the operands what I have to fetch in. So program bus becomes idle. So what they do is they utilize this program bus itself to fetch one of the operands and the other data bus is used to fetch the other operand. So when this is done, you are fetching both the operands at one given time. You're fetching the operands at one given time. So that is what you're trying to achieve here. So in this way, what you're doing, instead of three buses, you utilized just two buses. That is one program bus and one data bus. Program bus itself, you used to fetch one of the operands once the instruction has been fetched. So this is what you can do. So this is one alternative. Now, but what about storing the result? What about storing the result? This is with respect to fetching now. Fetching. I can fetch by using two different data buses, one program bus to fetch specifically for instruction. But if I want to reduce the cost, then what I do is I don't use another data bus. I use the program bus, fetch the instruction. This becomes idle. Then after that, I fetch the operands. So once I fetch the operands, again, these buses are free. So now another thing to note down is what about these 2n bits? How do I deal with these 2n bits? So whenever we start multiplying, immediately I'll not be getting the results. I'll be getting the results, say first LS bits and then the MS bits. So or MS bits, LS bits. So in this sequence, that is generally it is the LS bits and then the MS bits. So if that is the case, how do I go ahead with storing those bits into the memory? So what I can do is one program bus or the data bus what I have used to fetch X and another program bus I am using to fetch Y. So once I fetch one of the operands, the bus becomes idle. The bus becomes idle. So this bus itself can be used to store the n bits of the result. And remaining n bits can be again stored using the other bus. So this is other way of doing it. So I can deal with if I want all the 2n bits to be present. So this is how I can go ahead. So n bits I fetch. Then after that, again, I fetch this one. So this bus becomes idle. So I go and take the n bits which have been generated and store it in the memory. Then next n bits, I use it and store it in the next location. So what is happening is you are storing Z in two locations. You are storing Z in two locations. So if you check X and Y, what is happening? X is n bits, Y is n bits. But this one is 2n bits, that is n and n. So first n bits I store in one location and next n bits I store in the other location. This I am doing it with the help of the buses. Now here, what happens is, if you just see, I have to go and access the memory 2 times for the result. I have to go and access the memory 2 times. That is, for example, for storing the LS bits and then storing the MS bits. So I have to access it 2 times. So even some of them might say that this much time we don't have, or this is not required. Can you reduce it still further? So first one was with respect to the architecture. That is, I provide buses of bits n bit and 2n bit, but this is not feasible. It is increasing the cost. So what is the alternative? Use program bus and data bus. So if the program bus is idle, you go and fetch the operand. So here we have program bus itself is acting as one of the data buses. So this is the alternate option. But for storing the result, so this is with respect to fetching the information, but storing the result, so use 2n bits, but 2n bit bus width. So, but what is happening? It is increasing the cost. So in order to reduce this, what we do, we go for the bus which has been fetched, which has fetched one of the operand will be idle. So once these n bits are made available, and next these n bits are made available, then only the multiplier will be giving you the result. So what this bus, when it is free, right? Once it has fetched the operand x, it is free. So once the n bits of y are made available, so bit by bit I'll be getting the result. So what I do is I take those n bits. So first n bits I store in the first location and next n bits I store in the next location. So total two accesses to the memory has to be provided, whereas x and y are just n bits each. Now even this one, if I want to reduce, then what other suggestion is, or another technique, what they do is they discard the LS bits. They discard this. I cannot discard the MS bits because those are of significant values. So what they do is, instead of storing the LS bits, they discard that LS bits and they store only the MS bits, which will be say of n bits. So it will be Z. Then this will be nn bits for x and y respectively. So this is these are the different approaches what they use in order to say achieve faster execution, reduce the cost. So these are the things what they try to achieve or implement. So that is what is given over here and in the next slides. Okay. So this is all done for single cycle execution operation. So in one cycle itself, I should be able to get the entire stuff done. So again, the delay depends on the maximum path delay which is present in this entire circuitry. That is what is given. If I have bus widths of 2n bits, this is actually expensive to implement. So we don't go for that one. So what we do is we go for different alternatives. That is what is discussed here. First one, after multiplication instruction is fetched, the program bus is free. So that one I can use to fetch one of the operands, say y, and the other this thing is available. So say for example that x is already been fetched and y will be fetched using program bus. It can be either you fetch x or either you fetch y. So you fetch one of them, then so this is how you increase the speed of operation for fetching using the buses which are available. Then second, what you can do is you can provide a separate bus for Z. But again, this might increase the overall cost. So in order to cater to that, what they do is, in order to again, instead of putting in another bus, what they do is they try to utilize the already existing buses. So here, what we did, program bus is there, that itself is utilized to access the data, and one data bus has already accessed the information. So this is what is done in this case. Now, what about the storing the results? You can provide one program bus the same to access the data this thing or operand, and another one bus to access the other operand, and another bus to store the result. But this is again not feasible because already I have these one extra bus is coming in. If I want to avoid this, what they do is, so if I have fetched instruction, or if I have fetched operand X, operand Y is being fetched. So once X is being fetched, this bus gets free. So I can utilize this bus to store the information. That is what is presented here. Okay. Uh, so next one is the shifters. So previously we dealt with the multipliers. Next one we'll be dealing with the shifters. So what is the purpose of the shifters? It is required to scale up or scale down the operands or the overall result what we have obtained. Now, why we have to do this? We have to do this to avoid some of the computational errors. So, which may be due to the overflow or underflow condition, we might have wraparound errors which come in. So, these are just a few things for why shifters are required. Now, where all you can just use the shifters. Now, for example, suppose we are adding two numbers, we are adding numbers. So in this case, we are considering n numbers. Now each number is n bits in its width. Each number is n bits wide. Now, as I spoke in previous this thing, if I am adding two n bit numbers, the result can be n bits plus one extra bit. Plus one extra bit. For example, if I am adding two bits numbers, that is this is nothing but 3 and 3, which is 6 in your decimal. In binary, what would happen? This would be 0, 1 carry. So it would be 1, and one additional bit will be generated over here. And now, similarly, if I continue, right? If I continue, what would happen is, so if I have three numbers, so this is nothing but the result is 9, 1, 0, 0, 1. It is actually 1, 0, 0, 1. Here we can see that two extra bits are being generated. Two extra bits are generated. Similarly, if you are adding, say, four numbers, so let me take all three itself, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1. So 3 4 is 12. So 12 is how much? 1, 1, 0, 0. So here you can see that two extra bits is generated. Now to this again, if another one, that is 5 numbers are added, then we have these things. So here, one observation, what we can do is, if we are having n numbers and each is n bits in it, n bits wide, then the sum can be maximum of n plus log n to the base 2. That is, so we saw that if two numbers are being added, then it is number of bits which is present to that plus log 2 to the base 2, which is n plus 1. That is what we had seen in the previous case. Similarly for 3, so it is 3. So log 3 to the base, this thing is greater than 1. So I cannot have fractional values. It will be n plus 2. It will be n plus 2. That is the number of bits. It cannot be a fractional value. So similarly, if I continue in general, I'll be having it as n plus log n to the base 2, where this is nothing but the number of digits or the number of integers or fractions you are adding over there. Okay. So when we are doing summation, or when we are adding the numbers, right, the maximum size of the sum would be equal to these many bits, n plus log n to the base 2. Now, if these extra bits are coming in, these may lead to overflow condition. These may lead to overflow condition. So due to which we'll be having some loss of information. So therefore, prior to adding, what we do is we scale down all the numbers. By how many bits? We try to scale it down by log n bits. So by doing this, what we are doing is we are preserving the accuracy. We are preserving the accuracy and the overall result. So once we do the summation, right? Once we do the summation, again we scale it up, and we scale it up by log n to the base 2 bits. So these many bits. How many bits we had scaled down? We'll scale it up by the same number of bits by the end of the result. So this is what we'll be doing in this case. So this is with respect to summation, why scaling would be necessary. So scaling up and scaling down is necessary in these cases. Now, what about the product? So if I'm multiplying two numbers which are n bits in wide, the maximum size can be 2n bits. The maximum size of the sum will the product will be 2n bits. Now, if the storage is just n bits, then what would happen is I'll be losing n bits which are present. If I don't want to do that, then I should have a mechanism to overcome this problem. So here, what they do is they follow some convention. Either you store these 2n bits in two different locations. If you want to preserve the accuracy and you don't want to discard anything, you store this result in two different locations. So in doing so, what is happening is you are accessing the memory two times. If you want to store, you have to access the memory two times. If you want to retrieve, you have to access the memory two times. So this might lead to some increase in the computational time. Now, another thing what we can do is we can discard the lower n bits. You can discard the lower n bits. Now, this actually discarding this one will reduce your accuracy. It will reduce your accuracy. Now, but what about with the signed numbers? What about with the signed numbers? So in unsigned numbers, if you're discarding those n bits, it will not have any problem because we are just losing n bits. Now, can we do the same thing for signed numbers? Signed numbers, I cannot do the same thing. So what happens is, since what logic we use is, since the MS bit is used for sign indication. MS bit is used for sign indication. What we do is, whenever we are multiplying, the MS bit of the overall result takes care of the overall sign. So if I'm keeping this in mind, then what they do is they shift the numbers prior to multiplication and they remove this one out of the equation. They remove this one out of the equation. So it is only this part what you utilize for multiplication. So here also you're losing the accuracy. I'll not tell that you will not be losing the accuracy. Here also you'll be losing the accuracy, but what you're doing is you are just discarding n minus 1 bits. You're not discarding all the n bits. Since you have shifted by 1 bit location, you might be filling it with 0. And overall result, what you get, you'll be getting the n bits data and n bits this side. But in this n bits, right, this one sign bit is added. Therefore, what happens is I'll be just discarding n minus 1 bits. I'll not be discarding all the bits over here. So it is only the n minus 1 bits what I'll be discarding. So slight improvement in accuracy as compared to this step. Just 1 bit, this thing increases there. You are rejecting only 1 bit lesser as compared to the unsigned numbers. So this is with respect to sum, and this is with respect to the product of the integers. Now, what about floating point additions? Now, in this case, we had seen that how floating point numbers are represented. They are represented with mantissa and a exponent value and an exponent value. So if I want to add two numbers, for example, I want to add 0.1 into 10 raised to minus 1 plus 0.2 into 10 raised to minus 2. So if I want to add these numbers, I have to see that the exponents are same. So here it is 10 raised to minus 1, but here it is 10 raised to minus 2. Either you make this one into 10 raised to minus 1 or convert this number such that its exponent is 10 raised to minus 1, or convert such that both have same exponents. Both have same exponents. So this one, if I just see, what I can do is 1.0 into 10 raised to minus 2 plus 0.2 into 10 raised to minus 2. So this will be 1.2 into 10 raised to minus 2. So this direct operation I cannot achieve in this case. So in these cases also, if you just observe, what you are doing is you are scaling the numbers. You're scaling the numbers. So that is what you are doing when you are, that is what shifters can be utilized for when we are doing floating point additions. So these are just a few examples. So in next session, we'll be discussing regarding these examples. So let us wind up here for this session.